Hi, everybody. This is Rich. We're going to go over the homework that was assigned last class period. I checked Connect. Um, Not everyone has actually been through all the homework, so I'll trust that you'll wait to look at this until you've given it a good, fair shot. Um, so let's start with problem 1444. Um, so that was the first one signed. And again, just high level, chapter 14 is all about some of the unique business decisions that face managers. And our goal as people doing managerial accounting is to come up with the numbers and do some quantitative analysis to help support this decision making. And in this case, in this particular problem, the decision is we have a local business, Contemporary Trends, that does a whole bunch of home remodeling and decor type product lines. So they have paint and supplies, carpeting, and wallpaper. And wallpaper, based on the information in the problem, is operating at a loss of $8,500. So on the surface, an unsophisticated manager might say, hey, it's operating at a loss, let's get rid of it. A more sophisticated manager is going to say, well, it's not as if all those costs related to that business go away. It does have some contribution margin that it's contributing. To what effect, if we eliminate wallpaper, will it impact our paint sales or our carpeting sales? So a more sophisticated and savvy manager is going to look at this a little bit more in depth. So that's what part one of this problem is really about. So let's look at part one in a brief, and then we'll regroup on parts 2 and 3. Part 4 was not assigned. So the first thing I did, part 1 asks, should they close the wallpaper operation? And we're going to approach this in 2 steps. The first step is we're going to frame up what is the contribution margin by each of these 3 areas. And we're going to take that basically by doing sales less variable costs. And we come up with a dollar amount for each. So that gives us a little perspective. That helps us frame up the problem. And if you were to take this wallpaper piece of $14,000 of contribution margin, if you were to eliminate it, what would you be better or worse off? So to begin, the loss of the wallpaper contribution margin, so this $14,000 here, you'd be foregoing that amount. So that is a unfavorable item in this case. Recall the information given in the problem. They would remodel the space currently dedicated to wallpaper. So that's a $6,200 item. So that's not working in favor. That would be a cost to the business. You'd have the added profitability from carpet sales. So recall in the problem, they say if we close down wallpaper, we're going to reallocate that space to high-end carpet. So that is a boost to the business. So that's an additive item here. And to get to this 32.5, we actually use the contribution margin ratio formula. So again, this is one of the formulas that I would expect to be on your study sheet. I think it's one of those tools in your toolkit that you have to have at the ready and you have to know how to use. But you have all the information as laid out in this little footnote. You have all the information to calculate what the contribution margin is. And if you know that the contribution margin is going to increase by a certain amount, whether it's a dollar amount or a percentage amount, you can plug your new amount into the formula and derive what the dollar amount increase or decrease would be. So that's what we've done here in this section. So pause the video if you need to familiarize yourself with how they used that formula, how they plugged numbers in, they played with the numbers, and they arrived at the 3250, and then press play when you're ready to continue. The next item that we're going to take into consideration are the fixed cost savings. So recall in the problem, they mentioned that 40% of the fixed costs they could recover. The rests are essentially sunk costs. Regardless of whether you keep wallpaper or not, you're going to have to pay them. So this is an additive item. There's decreased contribution margin from paint and supplies. Recall in the problem, if wallpaper closes, some of those wallpaper customers bought paint and supply materials. And as a result, if you get rid of wallpaper, they're going to get that somewhere else, including the paint and supplies that they would tag on to their wallpaper purchases. So that is calculated as basically taking the 76,000 contribution margin times the 20% given to you in the problem. Lastly, there's the increased cost in advertising. This is a cost that you would not have if you chose to keep Wallpaper open. So when you tally up all these individual items, you can see income or loss from closure is actually a loss of $6,400. So that all of a sudden puts a little bit of a new perspective on your decision making. Initially, you think they're operating a loss, just close them down. But if you close them down, you're going to incur even greater losses. So give this some thought and try to articulate in your mind if given this quantitative data, given what little you know about their business and given in the context of the problem, how would you frame this up to management? How would you write a concise memo or recommendation to management suggesting a course of action? So give that some thought, pause the video, and then we'll go on to parts 2 and 3. All right, if we're all set with part 1 of the problem, let's continue to part 2. So part 2 asks if your decision would be any different if you knew you had $11,850 in inventory related to the wallpaper. So again, this is a question about relevant costs. Is this cost relevant to your decision making? In this case, this cost should be ignored. The inventory cost is sunk. So there's nothing you can do to change that. So whether the department is closed or whether they keep it, they're still going to have wallpaper inventory of $11,850. So again, the key theme here in part 2 is understanding what is a relevant cost, what is relevant to decision making. And then part 3, I think this is a really interesting question and one that you could have a lot of play with. Recall that in each of these decisions, there's a qualitative aspect and a quantitative aspect to the decision making. So the quantitative is the number crunching, the qualitative is kind of understanding the depth of the problem, and it requires a little bit more finesse. But part 3 is really talking about some qualitative considerations, and the question asks, what would an internet or a magazine-based competitor have working in its favor compared to a brick and mortar store based in the Baltimore area? So there's 3 obvious ones that stick out, and these are listed here. The internet firms can carry little or no inventory, so they can actually do drop shipments. A drop shipment is when an online retailer basically does the marketing, gets the customer, closes the deal, and then the actual goods, in this case wallpaper, would be shipped directly from the manufacturer to the customer. So in that case, the internet firm never takes possession of the inventory. As you can probably tell, that's a lot less hassle than trying to manage inventory, to buy it and to resell it, keep it stocked and whatnot. Secondly, these internet firms do not need real retail space for walk-in customers. Retail space costs money. And whether you sell a lot of wallpaper or a little bit, you still got to pay the rent. Third, internet and magazine-based firms can conduct business globally. Our Contemporary Trends, the example in this problem, has a single store. They're limited to a specific geography and perhaps a limited demographic. So as a result, they don't have the reach, they don't have the scalability, as it's often called, to really grow unless they grow with other brick and mortar stores with the problems of inventory and the cost of retail space. So anyway, I included this part in the assignment because I wanted you to think beyond the numbers. I would encourage you to continue doing that both in this class, on your assessment, and throughout your accounting classwork at Alverno. So that takes you through 1444. Make note of your questions and we can go over it before the assessment.